his computer. Okay. You ready?
Yeah, mate. Yep.
All right, here we go. Transport Inquiry Podcast, talking to the driver's advocate, Trevor Warner. You can check him out on Facebook. How you going, Trev?
Good, Steve. Good, mate.
Yeah. Where you at, mate?
Just on my way back up to Brisbane with a load of produce.
Yeah. It'll be busy doing produce, yeah?
Yeah, mate. Yeah, food's going pretty well. It's nearly the end of the season down there, but when that finishes, it'll go back up to North Queensland again.
Yeah, right.
Keeps us hopping.
Yeah. You been running into the new Melbourne market a lot?
Yeah, I was down there last week. Did a bit into Coles. I got all supermarket on tonight. So yeah, a lot of DC work.
What's the go with you've put a thing into Fair Work to get paid for loading and unloading?
Yeah, well, this has been a problem for a long time, and different sectors of the industry have different issues. One of the biggest problems that we have is, for example, farmers. You know, you get a time to be told to be at the farm. You get out there, and you know sometimes it might take you 2 or 3 hours to get loaded, and then you get down into Woolies or Coles. Woolies Sydney was probably my worst experience. They're just shoving so much product through the place that everyone's just got to wait and be patient. And you know, you could get straight in through the security gate, and then wait out the back there for a couple of hours, and then get on the dock, and you know, an hour there. I've been 2 hours on the dock before, just unload 22 pallets because they're short-staffed, and then you've got to turn around and wait for your paperwork. Like it's all. If we were, you and I were electricians, we could bill that out. Our billable hours would be whatever we're on the job, and then we get to bill travel time as well. Where this trucking game is just ridiculous, and whatever it's costing nobody nothing, no one cares. It's just the driver's just going to cop it sweet, and tomorrow's another day.
What is the amount of hours unpaid that you worked this week?
Oh, this week, I've had a pretty good week this week. But say down in Sydney, I had 2 deliveries before shooting down to the Riverina. I probably would have burnt up 4 hours, I guess. Now the award says that I'm paid K rate, which is that's fine, no problem with the K rate. We leave Brisbane, we get down to Sydney, and the K rate covers the hours that we work. If we were being paid a different way, like hourly plus overtime plus penalty rates, it works out pretty close to the mark. But the difference is that, say, a toll driver or anyone doing overnight express, for example, the express companies, or even some of the bigger cold movers now, like, you know, Scott's and Lindsay Brothers, for example, those drivers go straight into their depots, and that's it. They're effectively signed off and their shift's finished, where a lot of other drivers, we've got to go and do our deliveries. So I could travel down with, say, a Scots driver. We get to Sydney. He'll get out. A fresh driver will jump in. A local driver will jump in on hourly. And we could be delivering at the same place side by side. I'm not getting paid a cent, apart from maybe, you know, $10 for a few kilometres running around. Some companies don't even pay the kilometres running around. It's just GPO to GPO, as we're all aware of. And then both of us finish at the same time. I go back to, say, BP at Eastern Creek, and the other driver goes back to his depot, and that's where our shift's finished. The big one is that I've done, you know, 2, 3, even 9 hours one day at Woolies was just absolutely insane. The local drivers get paid by the hour, and the long distance drivers, it doesn't come into the award.
So what happened when you posted something about they blocked the application in Fair Work? What to
Yeah,
say that the driver's advocate doesn't represent drivers.
well, that's right. See, they can't challenge the mathematics. We've got 2 awards effectively controlling road transport, and if they want to attack the mathematics, they're going to lose every single time. So what they're doing is they're saying, well, hang on, there's been 2 parties, 2 applications got put in. The Fair Work Commission joined those applications together for efficiency of the court, which is totally understandable. And now, where are you? Oh, sorry about that. We're now in a situation where they're saying, well, hang on, this is only 2 drivers. There's over 200,000 drivers around the nation, and we've just got two drivers who are having a whinge. So, let's not worry about them. Let's focus on the biggest picture. So they've replied to the application opposing any changes. So they want to keep everything the way that it is, and it's been that way for the last at least 1993 until now.
Yeah, well, Gary Brown, Saar, and everyone else says the same thing. So, I was talking to Senator Still the other day, and like he said, there's no representation for drivers, and these same barristers that would have fought down whatever you've done are the same barristers that deal for the ATA and stuff like that.
Well, that's right. We've had replies in opposition. None of them are supporting us, although NatRo did provide some mathematics which supports our position, and they did say they're sympathetic to our complaint. However, then they've tried to attack our credibility and our ability to understand legalese. Well, the problem that we've got is we've effectively got 2 components to the award, and that's driving and their version of loading and unloading, which is simply a forklift operator or a crane operator. Legally, we can't operate those pieces of equipment unless we've got a special high-risk license, which comes at an extra charge. So what they're effectively saying is unless if you're just backing onto a dock, or unless you're actually driving the forklift or operating a crane, to say you're unloading bricks, for example, or pipe, and you're using a HIAB, anything outside of those 2 tasks isn't classified as work. You're on downtime, or you're off duty, so to speak. So that's the 2 things that they want to focus on, and like I said, mathematically we can beat them in court. So they're attacking our credibility and what the courts term legal standing. Now, I did get support from the National Road Freighters Association. There's members there that understand that they're competing on an uneven playing field. They're quoting for work. They're pricing in what they think is a fair rate, which includes all the components and keeps their drivers happy, gets all the equipment maintained the way they like. But then they're losing out on those contracts to other transport companies coming in that, they may be old companies, they may be new companies. We're seeing a lot of new companies pop up where they go in and undercut the rate. They get the work, but we need to start looking at how are they undercutting that rate. And I believe long discussions with Senator Still and myself, and if we're going to breach the tax laws, if we're going to breach the wages laws, if we're going to breach the Corporations Act in various ways, well, bugger it, why don't we just all transport drugs and make heaps of money? What's the difference? It's just another law that we're going to break to make a profit. And I've used that example with relevant government departments before. If we were drug dealers, we'd have every enforcement agency in Australia or indeed the world coming down on us to shut us down. But if we're running a transport company and we're ripping our drivers off, manipulating the letter of the law, that's the Aussie way. No one seems to care about that. But what's the difference? The law is the law, isn't it?
Well, it's supposed to be, but there's no one enforcing anything anyway, unless it's in their benefit to target those things, either politically or financially, to target these huge cash grabs and data grabs and all these things that they're doing right now under the guise of a COVID-19 pandemic. They've, closed a lot of industry, closed a lot of, everything. But, truck drivers are still getting killed and still working for free a lot of the time, or working for less than what they're due. And, it's hard when you try and work the process by putting in an application with evidence and all that kind of stuff, and then, their overwhelming power of pile of barristers to put their hands up and speak just doesn't matter what sort of evidence you can crush them with. They can crush us with their billions of dollars.
Well, that's the most galling part about it. You've got barristers on, I don't know what they charge now for a good barrister, $500 an hour, $1,000 an hour, plus all the perks. And here they are attacking somebody who's struggling to earn $30 an hour. Or if you look at the award, the minimum base rate of pay is $23.33 at the moment for a B-double driver. It's just insane. It always seems to come back to the golden rule. Whoever has the gold rules the day. But there's laws that are being broken, and interpretations of those laws. That's probably the biggest thing, because since 1993, we've had a half a dozen important cases that have brought this to a head, and all those cases have failed because of the definition of loading and unloading. Now, legally, it means, well, I'll use simple language. If you're not driving the forklift, you're not loading and unloading. So therefore, anybody that takes their logbook to court and says, I haven't been paid for this task, I just can't remember which commissioner it was now, but he actually agreed that, yes, the driver did perform the tasks. So let's look at the definition of loading and unloading. And that's where the case fell down, because the driver was, I think it was a Linfox driver actually, he wasn't driving the forklift. He was present, he was assisting the forklift, doing gates and ply, not gates, sorry, your load restraint inside your fridge van. But because he actually wasn't driving the forklift and he wasn't doing gates and tarps, he was denied justice. He lost the case. So even though he was present, he was technically on the clock. According to his logbook, or according to the fatigue laws, he was at work. But the Fair Work Act, the award, the way that it's written, says, no, sorry, you don't deserve to be paid for that time.
Yeah, it's it's how they make their money, these large companies.
Well, listen, you think about it. If every driver even does 5 hours overtime a week, that's. There was a gentleman in America that's starting to do a bit of YouTube work now, and he's reiterated the same thing as what I've been saying. He works on 20 hours a week. So by time, if you've got to wash your own truck, do all your loading and unloading, any other activities that paperwork and all that sort of stuff, it could easily add up to 20 hours. Now, effectively, most interstate drivers out here are doing 2 full-time jobs. That's 76 hours a week on average. But, the fatigue laws say you can only average 72 hours a week. Well, we probably are doing 72 or less on actual driving and actual work, but between the delays in the consigners and the consignees, and just general stuff that we all know is a normal day to us, it isn't taken into account. Now we can legally, we could work 80, 100 hours a week, but if we're sitting at Woolies or Coles and we can dive in the bunk, whether you're sitting there eating lunch or whether you have a snooze or something, that's not work time. That meets the definition of rest. So what we've got now is a situation where schedulers are scheduling 14 hours of driving time and another 3 hours throughout the day in whatever. But, most schedulers would know that we're going to be sitting at Coles and Woolies for an hour or 2 hours, so they'll schedule that time for us to be in the bunk. So our 14-hour maximum work time is in effect a 17-hour day. And, I had a day there where I only did 450 Ks for the day, but I'd actually done a 17-hour day in total just through the delays and the freight not ready. And I was at work, I was on the dock waiting for freight, but I wasn't driving and I wasn't using the forklift, so you don't get paid. Now, I'm only just one driver. So if we were to have a forum where drivers stepped up to the plate and said, yeah, I'm the same, or if we had a petition, for example, does this happen to you on a regular basis? And we get 1,000 names or 2,000 names, which is only 1% of the drivers in Australia. They've got to sit up and take notice, because then it becomes a cluster. And that's how this government operates. If there's a cluster or something, then they sit up and take notice. Or a court will go, well, hang on here, look, this guy's got 2,000 drivers that are saying the same thing. We've got a problem. We need to fix it.
Well, here's the thing, right? Now, you authored a submission to the Senate inquiry, and so have I, and so has Jerry Brown, right?
Yep.
Now, Jerry Brown wrote another one, and they refused to publish it, right? They accepted it as correspondence.
Yes.
They did the same thing to me. I wrote another one, 300 pages, right? They refused to publish it. They accepted it as correspondence only, right? They also did it to Keith Littler. Did the exact same thing, right? So if they're already refusing to publish our evidence, right, then that they've already used this COVID-19 pandemic to cover their tracks for the bushfires and the drought and the economic mismanagement and all the other things that they've done behind the scenes, right?
Yep.
So when it comes to our industry, they're already stopping us from speaking out with just the evidence, with just pointing out the big hole in the ground in their story about how the industry really looks. Like, so, and I'm sure if you wrote another one right now, they'd probably do the same thing to you as well and deny it to be published. And also,
that's right.
And also to warn you that it would be an offence for you to publish it.
That'd be right. They've essentially laid out the terms and conditions of a contract, and anything outside of that, the date and time, the 5 p.m. on Friday the 17th of April, for example, that's the cut-off. Anything after that, they've given us the opportunity. You know yourself, Steve, a week or 10 days in this game can just go in next to no time, and you think, oh, bugger, I meant to send that email to Senator Sterl. It's a simple thing to do. You could just state 10 simple facts and go, this is a problem, this is what I've experienced in the last 10 years, bang, gone. But you get sidetracked so easy, and they, you know, for the first inquiry hearing down at Albury, I didn't even know that was happening until the morning. So there's a classic case. Now, I keep my finger on the pulse of everything that goes on Fair Work, I get emails every day of what cases have been entered, what decisions have been made, whose EBA has been passed, all that sort of stuff. And yet I didn't get that correspondence to say that the Albury was the time and the place. So they're filtering evidence there already.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you and I were both going to speak to the Senate on the same day, 24 hours after the COVID-19 lockdown was when we were due to give our evidence.
Yeah.
Like the Albury hearing. So, I mean, we've got a bit more time to practice, I guess, but the industry is so different today compared to what it was then, because the price of fuel has dropped by 50 cents a litre.
Yeah, well, that's right. I've back in the day, I used to trade a bit of oil futures and what was going on, and I've always taken keen interest in that. That's right. And there's also not only has fuel come down, but given the circumstances of employment, I'd say the general community would, and actually on Facebook, there was even somebody made the comment, "Oh, truck drivers will be loving this, plenty of work." Well, you know, I guess we're being essential services workers and feeding the nation. We are lucky to even have work, and it's probably a little bit distasteful if you want to sit back and complain about how much we're getting paid. You know, I've had two accountants that I spoke to trying to sort issues out with myself and other drivers, and they've gone, "You made $100,000 last year. What are you complaining about?" And I'm going, "Well, I work full-time jobs, 2 full-time jobs. So do you think $100,000 is enough for 2 full-time jobs, and considering you're only home 1 day a week?" And they sort of shrugged and went, "Oh, well, yeah, that's the sacrifice that you make." But they actually challenged our
meanwhile, this is an accountant that's on $300,000 a year.
Well, exactly.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. So it's they think that they're worth more because they've done X amount of time at university. Well, you know, out here, well, just take yourself, Steve. I would safely admit that it took me at least 5 years to get to know everything that I know now in basic operations of transport. By the time you do different jobs and different aspects, so we've all done our apprenticeship, and we're sitting back looking at these new drivers coming to the industry and going, "Mate, you really need to brush up on your skills." But according to the award, they're as smart as what we are apparently, and because they're getting paid the same amount of money as well. Yeah.
You know, it's a whole big mess in a lot of different ways. In that someone with 20 years experience is treated the same as a bloke with 20 hours, and you know, it's difficult to show distinction between how much experience people have just when they're wearing different coloured T-shirts and not some kind of a pilot's shoulder, you know, stripes, you know, a captain's hat and a captain's, you know, shoulder bridge to show his seniority. Like coach captains used to have it. And because you would have to put trust in them to be the highly skilled driver to do the job safely, right? And with trucks in Australia, the driver's so tired at the end of the shift, when you have your shower, you don't really feel like putting your tie on and your cap and making sure your pants are pressed and all that kind of stuff, right? Because there's no time. Right. There's no time to be professional in that way and have a press suit.
No, that's right. I had a guy talk to me about that. we were having a few drinks one day, and he's off the road now, but he used to do market, and then he worked for UTO, and they had a bit of a laugh about the white shirts and the ties and what the expectations were.
Mm.
But that's where you've got your big companies, and that's your task. Your only task is to get in that truck and go from point A to point B, and you get out. I call it the Pony Express. Now, those guys, that's probably the only skill they got. If they were to change a tyre, they'd probably refuse because they'd get their white shirt dirty.
Mm.
But even I was talking to a Linfox tanker driver there one day at Volvo when we were getting our truck serviced, and he was just saying, no, he just drives. If the tyre blows out, he just rings up somebody, which is fine. But when you're running down from North Queensland and whether you're going across to Perth, you've got to have your stuff with you. Help could be six to 12 hours away. By the time they're ready to do your job, where I always carry my tools, and you can always fix simple things where you're up and running in a couple of hours, and you can limp in to get help. Now that's a skill that's taken a long time to learn, and yet we're not recognised for it. But the Queensland government, I just can't remember the total number now, but it was something like $800 million that was allocated for driver training to upgrade your skills. And we got I took advantage of that just to have a piece of paper. It didn't mean much at the time, but it's a Certificate 3 in, I think it's heavy vehicle operations. And it goes through all the things that you've done, from load restraint to oversize to paperwork and all that, and it lists it all out there, almost like an apprenticeship thing. Now, you get another driver who I talk to regularly, was doing overnight express, and they were at this place, and there was a new Australian lobbed in, and he really messed the yard up and couldn't reverse, so they've gone over to offer some help. And after they sorted the initial problem out, they got yakking to this guy, and he was from India. He answered an ad in a paper. He rung some guy here in Australia, and next minute he's on a plane, parachuted into Melbourne. Got told to get a taxi to this address, and basically got handed a company shirt, told to get a logbook the next day. You could use these pages for the first day, and here's a GPS. Return it when you get back. Brisbane's that way. This poor bugger. No wonder he ended up in a world of pain. But this is what's going on. That particular guy just happened to be an Indian guy, but I'm sure there's some Australians here as well that need a job, and all of a sudden the job agency rings up and says, you can go and get your truck licence. They'll do it for you in 8 hours or a day over the weekend. And if he's already got a truck licence, he can upgrade to a multi-combination. So he's driving around Sydney in a tip truck or a concrete agitator on the Friday. He does his course over the weekend. He fronts up to RMS or the RMS offices on Monday morning, gets his licence endorsed. Monday night he's in a double road train out to Bourke to hook up to a third train and off to Darwin. Like, really? Is that where the point where we've got to? Things are that simple.
It can be. It can be, as you know, because it's unregulated to the point that that's happened many times. So, here's the thing about the COVID-19 pandemic, right? And beforehand, like, nothing's different, really. There's still going to be companies going broke because they can't pay their bills because they've got no work or whatever. The price of fuel might have dropped a hell of a lot, and they might have an advantage to not pay their loans for a couple of months or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But if we go into a Great Depression type recession, imagine trying to figure out how you're going to pay off a fleet of trucks. when they're not constructing anything. If they don't start constructing things soon, there's going to be a lot of people put their machinery to auction for no reason because of the power grab.
Well, this is right. This was something that popped up in the RSRT. Like they were saying, with all the story that they've sold, that the owner drivers were going to be out of work, and then the second-hand dealer market come into it and said, "Yeah, look, what are we going to do with all the stock? We got to sell trucks." So you always read about in owner driver or the magazines that of new truck sales. Well, that's fine, but what happens to the old trucks? What we're seeing now is 104s, 104Bs are being reconditioned, put on the road with an old set of taut liners. Okay, old mate's been able to get on the road and up and running for, say, $150,000, and he's gone and he's doing work. But what's he getting for that work? The companies or the freight consigners and the consigners, they know. They've got professionals advising them on their numbers, and they'll say, I think it was a Coles guy said, we're gonna save 5% this year on our transport. Well, what's happening now is we're seeing Coles, and in particularly Toll, lots of toll trailers running around with second-hand gear out front. How can a new fleet, like I'm driving a pretty new Volvo at the moment, and my boss has got to be struggling to compete in the marketplace against the older second-hand trucks.
Toll are gone, mate. Toll are pretty much gone, right? Because they paid $8 billion too much for it.
Yep.
And they can't turn a profit. They got a massive computer hack and a data breach.
Mm-hmm.
They're now playing second fiddle to Australia Post and Star Trek.
Yep.
Right? And they're supposed to be the largest in the Southern Hemisphere.
Mm-hmm.
Right? All their overseas divisions are going to get broken up and sold off, and then they'll do that here on the shore. Yep. They'll try and get a hedge fund or someone else to take over what's left and strip it to whatever they can get out of it. Because if the current economic situation stays the same, where people aren't ordering all this crap online as much because they can't use anything, you can't do anything at the moment, so all their trades down, and the click strikes against Amazon because their workers are getting COVID-19.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, whatever entities left standing at the end of it, like they're already talking about trying to bail out Virgin, $200 million from the state government of Queensland. They want $1.2 billion or something, all up to keep a second carrier. Like, just let it die. Just let it die. Don't throw good money after bad. Let it die. Let Toll die. We've got Linfox. We've got AHG. We've got all the others. If they fall over, someone else will pick it up. There's no point throwing big money after it.
No, that's right. If they're crazy enough to go in and operate on a 3 or 4% profit margin, and work on turnover, it's just insane. Like I was looking at Linfox figures recently. They turned over was just under $2.8 billion for the year, and they made 130 million. I'm sure there was some write-offs and all that amongst that, but look at the infrastructure of the plant and equipment that they've got, the leases and everything, all your fixed liabilities that they've got to cover. Those margins are just crazy. Like if a small business operated on that, they'd be out the door in next to no time. You're only, how many transport companies are only one rollover away from bankruptcy?
Well, 30,000 apparently.
30,000, yeah, I'd believe that.
Out of 208,000, so 15%. 15%. I guess.
Well, that's it. Now, it's just take toll for example. Okay, they've quoted on a job. They've kicked who Camerons or whoever had the deal, or Green Freight, whoever had the deal before them in Victoria. They kicked them out. Now, what would happen if someone was to stand up and say, "We know for a fact that Toll's trafficking drugs," and all of a sudden, you know, the police would be in there in next to no time, tearing everything apart, checking bank accounts, all that. But and I'm not suggesting that they are, but as an example, from a law enforcement point of view, they'll come down on them like a ton of bricks. And yet we know for a fact that there's trucks running around that looking pretty dodgy on the maintenance side of it. So Toll have gone and engaged subcontractors on whatever rate, we don't know, because they're not coming forward. Their equipment looks dodgy. Are their drivers getting paid right? Are their drivers on ABN? You know, TW Victoria had a young fella there. He was a student on a student visa. Now he just wanted a job. He was getting plenty of work, but somebody along the way set him up with an ABN, and he was on $20 an hour plus the GST, doing the single and B double work. He wasn't even getting the basic rate. He had no idea about the GST. Somebody else done the paperwork for him. Had no clue about the insurance side of it. Now this guy was just really running the gauntlet, and yet he was allowed to drive that truck for his boss, who was subcontracted to a major public company, and yet nobody gave it a second thought. Fair Work Ombudsman actually said, because one of the TWU members rung them, trying to help this guy, and the Ombudsman said, "Oh, we can't do anything. He would have to come in and complain." Now, the guy didn't know what to complain about because he didn't know the law. He was only new in Australia. He loved the job, but he thought he was on a good deal. So the so-called wage sheriff wasn't interested, and that's not the only one. We've had quite a few that we've sent to them and go, "Check this out. This driver's got a problem, or that driver's got a problem," and it's just gone nowhere. It's like the wage sheriff's drunk at the saloon. They don't care. They're just so overwhelmed with work, with complaints, that they just never get on top of it, and most of it falls through the cracks.
Well, I mean, it's like how they talk about the chain of responsibility, right? But they've had like 2 prosecutions or 4 prosecutions. That's not a really heavy chain to burden an entire industry worth, whatever it is, percentage of GDP annually, to have a responsibility chain that has only produced a few prosecutions in an industry that has a death every day and a half, 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
So it just seems obscure that they say that the responsibility chain is a successful program.
Yeah, well, they can say all they like, and I'm pretty sure that the numbers aren't going to change because it is still completely legal to. Hang on, we've got a problem, Houston.
You're going. Keep going. Keep talking.
We've got a situation where drivers can still be sitting in Sydney all day.
Mm.
And not be starting their shift until the end of the day. So you've got drivers that are awake for 6 to 8 hours before starting a 14-hour shift, and that's completely legal. And it's been that way ever since I've been back on the road this time around, which is 15 years.
Mm.
But we just accept it.
Mm. Well, if you speak up, you're going to lose your job, right? Or you're going to get banned from site. You're going to be told that you're a troublemaker, and that's it. You'll be banned from site. You won't get back there. You might as well have just lost your job in a lot of ways if you do bring it up and cause trouble.
That's right.
Mm.
That's right. Now, you and I both have got a mutual friend, and they have paid the price. They stood up for what was right, and if they were a government sector worker, the union would have been in there, and the media would have been in there, and they would have got full support off everybody. But because they were a truck driver, they were attacked from their employer. The employer then put out the word into the industry that this driver is a troublemaker, and I know for a fact there were several jobs that they didn't get because of that. This word got around, and then to make matters worse, they had 3 years worth of logbook pages, pay slips, all the evidence in the world to demonstrate the underpayment. And the ombudsman turned around and said, yeah, we can see that you're underpaid here and you're underpaid there. But then they did what they call a sampling of a 3-month period.
Yeah.
And they picked a period where it was dead quiet. It was in between seasons.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, oh, well, yeah, in actual fact, you were overpaid, so case closed. And we've just gone, what the hell just happened? Mm-hmm. But it come down to evidence. And even though we had evidence, we didn't have the support of the so-called wages sheriff. Mm-hmm. And I spoke candidly to the investigator. I've gone, this is the problem. This is where the underpayment's coming in. So you need to ask for this evidence. And you've got, I can't remember the section in the Fair Work Act now, but there's evidence there for right of entry and to produce records. Well, none of that happened. Mm-hmm. No records were requested. We told them where the needle in the haystack was, and they refused to investigate. And to the point where the investigator actually said, "Oh, the kilometre rate model doesn't fit into our calculators." So, in other words, unless you're just a normal employee on hourly plus overtime penalty rates and entitlements, if you don't fit into that model, they can't help you. That's pretty well what got said.
Yeah,
it's just crazy.
They have to keep. They have to maintain the status quo, right? They can't show any progress like that. There's certain elements behind the scene that are always pushing these status quo outcomes for a political reason that comes down to money to who funds who.
That's right.
We all know that.
It's the same argument in America. I've got a contact up in, I met on social media. He's a retired driver now, so he's not under pressure anymore, but he still owns his Peterbilt. He's often talking about it. And then we've got a spate of movies at the moment, and docos coming out about Jimmy Hoffa and what went on in the scenes there. And I just sit back and knowing what I know and things that we've seen happen behind the scenes that aren't in magazines, you just shake your head and you're going, nothing's changed except the scam has just got a little bit more refined and high tech, but it's still what goes on in the shadows still goes on. Although you don't see drivers getting executed or people getting executed these days, but they do it in other ways through.
Well, they don't
discredit.
They don't need to use murder as a way to intimidate. They just fire you or give you no work, and then therefore you are dealt with. It was a lot different back then. Everyone was in the union. The union was there for drivers, and whereas the Australian Transport Workers Union have never been there for drivers, in a fashion similar, that they are there in a limited sense, in that, they've helped me at times and they've not helped me at times. So, some people hate the union and other people love the union, and it doesn't have the strength that it used to, because it doesn't have drivers in it like you and me at the top of it. They've got these guys that got law degrees 20 years ago and they've been in the union 20 years. They've never driven a truck, but they know union politics, and they know union superannuation, and they know the guy that knows the guy.
That's what it's all about. Thanks for raising that point. It's something that it's been a learning process for me. And we had a group of drivers, half a dozen, had an issue with a negotiation of an EBA, and then when I started, this was back in 2 or 3 years ago when all this sort of first started, and I quickly realised what the problem was. And it's since been reinforced by other individual drivers. They want to solve the problem with a baseball bat. But in today's society, that doesn't work. We've got mechanisms in place which can deal with these things, but it comes back. We're a democratic country. Everything in Australia revolves around democracy. Now, the TWU may go in with a point that we have put to them, and they've got one lawyer against 9 others. Well, you know yourself, democracy, you can't win in that situation.
No.
So if you've got a group of drivers together, let's just say 30% of your workforce have got together, they've organised, they've gone, right, we're going to hire a lawyer and we're going to fix this once and for all. Well, the lawyer comes in and writes it all up, and then sits in front of the boss, and the boss goes, well, I really don't care what you say, because we've just had a vote and your 30 drivers have just been outvoted by these 70 drivers, so get the hell out of my yard. And these 30 drivers have gone, hang on, what the hell just happened? We should have won that. This is wrong. Well, it may be wrong, but it's democratically right. Now, this is where we need to understand that I've put it to drivers that if you can sacrifice 2 cups of coffee a week, and we have an organisation, although this is the problem, to replicate the TWU costs a shit ton of money.
No, you can't. Here's the thing about the rules about unions, and you can't just start your own truck driver union. You just can't. So the only way to do it would be to overthrow those in power of the union by having, our own delegate elected, up the top. But the thing is, right, is that they're more worried about bag chuckers at the airport and air staff being infected by COVID-19 than they are of drivers being killed.
That's right.
So, I mean, we're not going to get the airside staff on our side because
we're not.
No, because they don't care. And like Deliveroo and all these other Uber drivers and all that are trying to use the union, we're not going to get them on side. They couldn't care about our issues. So, and the bus drivers maybe, but they're not really. That they're more into moving passengers, and that has a different thing to it than freight. So they're not really going to support us. If we want to go on strike, the bus drivers aren't going to go on strike.
Well, that's right. Now that comes back to democracy as well. They're not going, and I've had the Queensland Union tell me this in as many words. They're not going to allocate members' money to an effort that they know is going to fail because of what we were saying before about democracy. they know that this industry is fractured. They know that the drivers, I'm talking employee drivers, they know that the employee drivers aren't going to stand together. So until they can get at least a yard, let's just say you and I start up a transport company and 60% of our employee drivers agree to be in a union. TWU would be in there quick as blink because they've got the majority. Anything that they say is democratically capable of winning. So while they keep the division amongst drivers, while they keep us fighting on Facebook amongst ourselves, we're never going to get that critical 50% and greater argument for the positive. So the union, the TWU themselves, it's a losing battle. They're never going to win until we can organise ourselves in such a way that we have the majority in yards. And people need to understand that if you don't have the majority, you could have the most moral, most legally accurate argument in the world, but if you don't have the majority of, in this case, drivers supporting that argument, it's a done deal. You're never going to win. The employer will always win, which is going to leave a distasteful taste in people's mouths, and they're going to go, "Oh, stuff the union. They're a waste of time." Well, they're not a waste of time in that respect. What is a waste of time is drivers arguing amongst themselves about, quite frankly, irrelevant crap. We've all got the same problem. Most people agree that underpayment of wages is a problem, or exploiting drivers is a problem. But they don't want to talk about that. They just want to argue about everything else that doesn't really matter to each particular driver. So this is the key thing. We need to focus and get our shit together and go, right, this affects all these people. We need a register of people who agree to this particular problem and hammer that. Once we hammer that, then the powers to be are going to go, well, holy shit, these guys have got they're organised, they've got the majority. Then we can start changing other things. But really, if we can fix the wages, most other things are quite okay to a certain extent.
There's a
Would you agree with that?
I'd agree there's a lot of wage theft. I'd agree there's a lot of superannuation theft. I don't know. I'm interested to see what's going to happen in the outcome of the end of this lockdown, to whether or not they're going to bother to schedule the hearing this year, because even though they say, oh, maybe another month and lockdown's gone, so it's April now, so it'll be May. We're not even at June, right? Now, they cancelled the reunion for the end of August. So if we're all out of lockdown at the end of June, I know it's 2 months away and it's hard. It's probably impossible to organise something like that in 2 months, but you can imagine that it will be such a large time that we're not going to get heard before Christmas this year.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, you can write off this year quite easily.
So a lot of the issues that we were going to talk about on the day are going to be kind of irrelevant anyway. Possibly, because if we do go into a Great Depression style recession after it, and people are just going to be happy to have a job, they won't care if it's the award or not.
Well, this is true, but we've still got laws and legislations in place. I see that some of the bigger companies are trying to modify their EBAs as we speak. And there's IR lawyers that are coming out saying, just be careful on this, because once that legal change takes place, well, then it's a permanent thing. And when if all this blows over in 6 months and then it takes 6 months to get back on track again, somebody is going to need to step up and put an application into the Fair Work Commission and go, we want to modify or vary this EBA. So then negotiations start all over again. This is something else that drivers need to understand. These agreements aren't carved in stone. They're fluid.
Mm.
And if you can get enough drivers complaining about the same thing, now they don't have to go to the union. All they've got to do is throw a bit of money into the kitty and hire their own lawyer.
Mm.
The lawyers, whether it's a union lawyer or a private solicitor, they're just a representative of the group, whether it's one person or whether it's, say, 60% of the workforce of that particular company.
Mm.
All this stuff is fluid, and drivers need to realise how the law works. It's quite a simple thing.
Mm.
And when I explain to people about how an EBA works, they go, "Oh, I didn't know that," or they've been ringing up the Fair Work Ombudsman, and the Ombudsman saying, "Oh, no, we can't do anything about that," which is entirely true. That an EBA is a Fair Work Commission process where unpaid wages, that then goes to the Ombudsman and they can deal with that. But an EBA essentially is a private agreement between the employees and the employer, which is enforced by the courts.
Mm.
Fair Work Commission holding jurisdiction.
Mm.
So,
well, I mean, here's the thing with the TW announcing that they would suspend all EBA negotiations during this pandemic, right?
yeah.
So however long that goes for has kind of made it all irrelevant. And they're going to argue that due to the unprecedented pandemic, that they can use it as an excuse for anything. It's their ultimate excuse now.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know if there's going to be anything done about it. Who knows how many transport companies are going to go under? You only have to look at the auctions to see who's gone just in the last month.
Yeah, that's right.
They call it a fleet restructure or something.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, some of their machineries are attracting good money too. So some companies are going under while others are chasing equipment.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's right, and that's in a way that's the free market. If although it's a virus in this case, but let's just say, for example, the Australian manufacturing sector decides to go, right, we're not going to risk manufacturing in China anymore. We're now going to use Australian iron ore to produce Australian products. And with our dollar the way that it is, this is something that a number of people don't understand as well. As our dollar goes down, that makes overseas product more expensive. So there becomes a point where the old saying that Australia's lost the Hills hoist, like we might get that manufacturing back because it's now more cost effective to produce locally. We save in shipping. We can control the quality a lot better, and we don't have to run the risk of foreign exchange rates. So all of a sudden, somebody will come up with a plan to go, we'll start making this here in Australia again.
Hmm.
So it's a fluid thing. This just happens to be a biological problem.
Hmm.
It could be an economic problem next time, or a lot of the world's trade is based on trust as well. And I think I'm pretty safe to say that China's trust has been fairly rattled recently. And I know a lighting company in Victoria. They started pulling back from China quite a few years ago now because it at the end of the day the quality, the price wasn't good enough to make up for the lack of quality. So they've gone back to manufacturing a lot in Australia. I see National Tiles now, they've got a plant punching tiles out here in Australia because it's now economically viable to do that, create jobs. They may have got a subsidy from the government. So while time of uncertainty now, sure, it's up in the air, but as the cases of the flu, COVID-19 start tapering off, it'll slowly get back into the swing of things, and I actually think it's going to make the Australian manufacturing a more attractive opportunity to Australian businesses.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, well, hopefully we'll see. Once this Melbourne to Brisbane 24-hour train line's fully operational, we'll all be living in a panacea of ultimate rail freight, and we won't have to worry about trucks so much anymore.
Well, that's a wonderful dream. You know, America's had rail for a lot longer than Australia has. They got a lot more people to reduce the scale of economy to make it technically rail should be a lot cheaper per capita in the US than here in Australia. And yet America's got the same problem with trucks. There's too many trucks on the market. There's drivers that aren't skilled, drivers that don't care, just want a job. Lots of trucks that are parked up with no work. It's just on a larger scale over there. So the rail will be good for one thing, but rail itself, you know, you've got railheads, so there's going to be delays at either end. So, you know, where road transport can have something delivered within 22 hours, you know, it could take 30 hours, 36 hours by rail because of the congestion at the railheads. Heaven forbid there's not a truck train collision on any of these low level crossings that's going to be yet to be built.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Who knows? It seems like such a strange thing for them to try and achieve, but it's you know, they have to spend that money somewhere. It might as well be on the rail, I guess. I thought they would have drought-proofed the country and fire-proofed the country, but yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the problem. There's, but you know, I was talking to Bob Catter recently about these types of things, infrastructure. He's pushing for more infrastructure in North Queensland, but you know, that's just our sector. You've got medical people pushing for hospitals. You've got education pushing for schools. We're pushing for roads. Farmers are pushing for dams. There's just so much to do because we haven't done a lot for so long. But you know, back in 2008, Kevin Rudd, when he was Prime Minister, stood up in Parliament and said that he wanted to start an infrastructure fund for roads and ports and bridges and rail and all that. He had a plan on how he was going to make that happen. But Joe Hockey stood up and basically shot him down in Parliament, said that they wouldn't support it, and that died right there and then. 6 weeks later, he was politically executed, essentially. So we've got politicians out there that want to do stuff. Bob Catter wants to do stuff in North Queensland. I think he's a big fan of the Bradfield scheme. Get some water from North Queensland down through the centre and down to the Murray. We want nice, smooth roads to drive on.
What do you think about ex-Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull's comments that he was in a dangerous position during the leadership spill fiasco? Would you describe it that it was extremely dangerous to his life?
Well,
is that danger really? Being politically stabbed in the back?
Depends on what forces are happening in the shadows. I'm sure there's people out there that don't like politicians.
But I mean, surely it's, you know, there's a lot more dangerous things than being talked about behind your back.
Well, if it's just talk shit, I don't know. I've always got a saying that you shouldn't upset people. You just never know if you're going to upset when you're going to upset the wrong person. I guess if you're going to go around, and this goes for transport companies as well, if you're going to go around taking advantage of people and stepping on people to climb the ladder, you're going to make enemies. You know, I can't see any reason why things can't be done. We can't all work together to achieve the end result. But, you know, human greed kicks in again. You just you can only do your best. I remember my first boss who taught me how this game taught me my trade, so to speak. And he just said to me, you know, when you got a lot of money, you become targets. You just never know who you're going to upset. That's always stuck with me. That so, you know, if he feels he's in danger, I'd be looking in the mirror going, "Who have I upset yesterday?" You know?
What I'd be wondering is, there you go. I'd be wondering where he has the nerve to come back with a biography when, you know, he has such a bad history at a time like this. I mean, he shouldn't expect much support. He's certainly looking back and whinging about it.
Well, you know, look at Hillary Clinton. When she lost, she's put out a book, and I think she's been taught a very hefty lesson by how many sales she's got and the rapid decrease in the price of the book.
Percentage chance she killed Jeffrey Epstein or had a hand in it?
Oh, mate, we'll never know. But you know, there's been plenty of evidence over the years. Plenty of people been locked up in jail that have been associated with organised crime. I've always, you know, I've been to places on the Sunshine Coast, you know, and then down in Brisbane on days off while you're waiting for your trailer to be loaded. You got to do something, and there's a certain demographic in society that just would do anything for a dollar, and you just, you know, there's that risk's always there. You know, I knew a guy that held up a service station and only got $20. He got eight years for his effort, but he only got $20 cash. You know, like, and you just think, man, why did you even consider doing something like that? But you know,
it's a long way off. It's a long way off from writing a biography about your own political history of being stabbed in the back by your own party and expecting people to buy it is all I'm saying. It's kind of rude that he was Kerry Packer's lawyer. You know, his claim to fame is Kerry Packer's lawyer managed to become the Prime Minister only to lose the Prime Ministership to someone that told him the day before that he could rely on him.
Yeah.
That's now the current Prime Minister.
Well, that's right. This is the game of politics. You know, like if you're gonna live by the sword, you're gonna die by the sword. There's no loyalty amongst thieves, as they say. Although, you know, you just can't trust people. Like just bringing it back to transport, how many truck drivers have done a special favour for the boss, only to find out 2 or 3 weeks later that you get shafted and stitched up on something else, you know, because you know you did him a favour, but they quickly forget. Yeah. But you know, you look at all these politicians, the amount of memoirs that are coming out. Hillary's done hers. I've read hers. Bill Clinton done his. And all these rich people are doing stuff, or people that have achieved. What did I download the other day? Mike Tyson, you know, Arnie Schwarzenegger stuff. Everyone's got a story to tell, and whether there's people there to buy it or not, that probably is the ultimate determination on how popular you really are.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing that I learnt about politicians. Right? There's 2 sorts of politicians, right? And there's the ones that go, "Oh, great, tell me all about it," and then they listen to you, and at the end they go, "Geez, thanks for telling me that. And then they go, righto, what's next? All right. And then there's the other ones that just don't even give you that.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even give you that much, you know.
Yeah, that's right. But that's the way that it works. Like they've got so many issues, and this is. I got pretty angry with the Fair Work Ombudsman because we gave them quite a few cases, the drivers that have risked their jobs.
Mm.
And I got the private phone call on a Friday afternoon. I was sitting down having a beer at home on my day off, and I got this phone call, and it was one of the assistant directors to the Fair Work Ombudsman, and I was basically told, yeah, look, it's bad, we know, but we're that overwhelmed, and there's more, there's more important agendas on the table. In other words, I took it as though that you truck drivers earn enough money, you can pay for your own lawyer, because all our people are taking care of the more vulnerable people that are struggling to make, $1,000 a week on a good week.
Yep.
So there's no resources left for us.
Yeah.
You can imagine a politician trying to help all their constituents. It's just the problems would be endless pretty well. So they've got to prioritise where they can. But this is a message that I need to get through to truck drivers is that you can't. We've now discovered that you can't rely on politicians. You can't rely on government agencies, and we've got the ability to be able to hire our own lawyer and put our own damn dog in the fight. Like we don't have to rely on the government. We've got the strength in numbers. If we could get our shit together and go, right, we've got a problem here. Everyone pays their $10 for 10 weeks, and bang, we've got our own professional in the court system, getting our problems sorted out. Because at the end of the day, the Fair Work Ombudsman and the Fair Work Commission, it ends up in a court. A judge or a commissioner has the final say. Put our own damn lawyer in the fight,
The problem is, right, at the moment, what we've got at the moment is we've got to get through this pandemic, right, however long that is, see what's left over from it, and try and move forward from there with it. But I don't think a lot of these things are going to change, like, at all. Not at least this year. But I mean, I was hoping that, we could have talked about a national park and bay strategy where these park and bays are getting put, where these guys are getting killed and named after them. And, it just makes sense, So,
Well, this is right. I like the idea. Parking bays are one thing. Now I do fridge work, so it's actually a risk for me to pull up in parking bays. I've had fridge motors turned off in the middle of the night. Woken up and a minus 22 trailer is now down at -5.
Yeah, but if there's more spaces, more spaces, you're not as likely to, like, if you pull into an empty spot, then you should be right. But if there's no empty spot for you, then you're stuffed. Like, if a fridge van's there when you pull up and it's running, it's kind of rude to go and turn it off.
Yeah.
But if you pull up next to a guy that's sleeping and you don't turn off your fridge motor, well, if he does, well, that's kind of expected, I guess. Sometimes some guys get a bit cranky. I know I have at times.
Yeah, well, it's mutual respect. Like Tamingley's got some good parking bays, and they're in the right spot. I got in there one night, and there was just trucks parked all over the place. I really couldn't find a spot, and there was no fridge vans there at the time. And so I just went back out on the street, pulled up for 15 minutes. I did have time in my logbook, which is another issue, but I ended up slipping up to Narromine, and going to bed there. But it's just mutual respect. But, drivers, these trucks that are running off the road in the middle of the night, what's actually going on there? We need to find out, along with your national parking-based strategy, we need an investigative team to go, what actually went on here? Did the driver drop his phone? What was a driver distraction? What actually caused this? And until we know the exact cause, we're really throwing darts at a dartboard line. Did this guy just finish a 10-hour shift in Melbourne, and now he's jumped in a truck and done a tar-cutter changeover, and he's turfed it at Wangaratta in the early hours of the morning. How do we know that? And if they could identify what's gone on in the previous 24-hour period, then they can go, right, okay, well, that driver should not have been driving that truck. He's pushing it too far. He's gone over the medically accepted 17 to 18 hour time period since your previous major break or your previous major sleep. And that's the reason. It's nothing to do with chain of responsibility, nothing to do with mechanical, nothing to do with logbook hours.
But even then, right? Even then, when you find out the data of whatever caused it, and you can try and address those mitigating circumstances, like I mean, a lot of it comes down to just people shouldn't be working between midnight and 6 because most people are asleep then, and it's easy to have a noddy if you're not used to it, or if it's a one-off thing, or the heater's on. Just it doesn't matter.
Well, there's a big one. The heater's on, yeah. So where were you ever trained in any fatigue management that what running the heater does to you?
But that's that's the difference between an experienced person and an amateur.
Well, this is right, and that's exactly what I had a discussion with Professor Ann Williamson about. Do these drivers that are having accidents, do they actually know what fatigue is? Have they actually been trained properly to go, look, if you do this is an outcome. To us, it's second nature. We know, but and this is what she said to me. We need to design the rules for the weakest link, and I'm going, well, that's fine, but you've got experienced drivers that are being treated like knuckleheads, and it's causing anger and anxiety, and that causes aggressive driving. So it's not just a one-faceted thing.
That's right.
So I suggest that we needed a staggered rating system. So if you've been on the road over a decade and you've had a good run, haven't had any accidents, they can tell by your GPS or by whatever work record you got that you're stopping regularly, and you're a responsible professional driver. Well, we should basically be given an open book to run the race however we like.
Yep.
But that's for the driver. But keep the schedulers on the existing rules where if the driver's coming in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, where they should only be scheduled to do a 12-hour shift. If he's a long-distance driver, 12 hours will get you to any of the cities, the legs that we do. So if you're going to schedule that drive for a 17-hour shift, well, you're being irresponsible. The driver no longer bears the burden of the schedulers. The schedulers become accountable to go, no, I can't do that. I'll only give that driver 12 hours or 14 hours worth of work. But that's not happening at the moment, and the drivers are getting nailed. The schedulers have just pull out all their tick and flick paperwork, go, no, it wasn't me, boss. Everything's sweet here. And the chain of responsibility just goes down the Googler, right there at that point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So these little things need to be identified. They want to crack down on the driver and increase the fines, but it's that may not be the actual cause of the problem. So they're wasting resources in the wrong area, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course. Mate, we could keep talking for hours about this stuff. but I've got to go. I've got something to do.
Yeah,
But
very
it
good.
was good. It was good to find out what's happening, and we'll try and encourage other drivers to at least send an email in, because your submission's published, mine is, and if
Yep.
if we can get 5 more, 2 more, even 10 more, it would at least give them more of a perspective about what drivers are going through. Because I mean,
Yep.
they're gonna get sick of hearing from me and you.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. They'll
and
just disregard us eventually.
well, they already do to me.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't get a call back to any of these meetings or these conferences or anything. They
Uh,
it's like, oh well, whatever.
yeah, that's it. That's it. You just never give up. Like, if you don't like being called names, you wouldn't stand up and pop your head above the crowd, would you?
Well, I mean, it's not, some of the things I say are unpopular,
Mm-hmm.
but so is the fatality rate. It's more unpopular than me. So
Yeah.
I'll keep going. We'll keep seeing what happens at this hearing and all the
Mm-hmm.
others, because I'm agitating everyone to, if they, hopefully they disagree with me and they come along and with their evidence to prove me wrong.
Yeah.
You know.
Look at Rod Hannafy's story. Just those green reflectors. 19 years he's been banging on about that, and it's only just recently where it's actually starting to happen. An entire generation has come through since then. It's just crazy. But that's the way the system is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Steve. Thanks for the chat.
Thanks, Trevor. So it's the Driver's Advocate on Facebook, and thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks for your time, Trevor.
No worries, buddy. Pleased to be here.
All right, there you go, everyone. Trevor Warner, the Driver's Advocate.